My husband smirked and said, "Last night, I was with the best woman in the universe." For a second I thought he was joking. One of his silly morning comments meant to tease me. But his tone, it wasn't playful. It was low, calm, almost proud. My hands froze on the teacup. The gentle morning sunlight was spilling across our small kitchen table, turning everything golden. Outside I could hear the hens clucking near the fence, the sound I usually found comforting. But that morning the air felt heavy, like even the house was holding its breath. I tried to smile. "Well," I said, "I hope she made you breakfast too." He chuckled softly, staring at the steam rising from his cup. "She didn't need to. She was enough." Something inside me tightened. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but his eyes, they were distant, lost somewhere else, like he wasn't really with me at all. We had been married for 22 years, long enough for me to know when something had changed, and lately it had. He came home later than usual. He smiled less, and when he did, it never reached his eyes. Still, I had told myself it was just work, or maybe age, the way time dulls passion into routine. But that morning when he said those words, I felt something break quietly inside me. I watched him finish his tea and reach for his coat. He didn't kiss my forehead like he used to. He didn't even look back when he stepped out the door. The moment the latch clicked shut, I whispered into the silence, "Who is she?" The only reply I got was the wind brushing against the old window panes. That evening I tried to act normal. I cooked his favorite stew, laid out his slippers, even lit the small candle we kept on the dining table, the one he said made our meals feel like a little celebration. But when he came home, his expression didn't change. He barely touched his food. "You're quiet," I said gently. He shrugged. "Just tired." He went to bed early, leaving me alone at the table with a half. Before we began, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart and remind us of life's quiet miracles, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It truly helps our little storytelling family grow. At the table with a half-empty plate and 100 unspoken questions. When I finally joined him in the bedroom, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. His breathing was steady, but there was a faint scent in the air. Something flowery, faintly sweet. Not my perfume. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the moonlight falling across his face. The man I'd built my life around, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, suddenly felt like a stranger. The next morning he was gone before I woke up. A note on the table read, "Don't wait for me tonight." I turned the note over in my hand. He never left notes. He always called. That's when I noticed something odd. A small smear of red ink at the bottom of the paper. It wasn't lipstick. It wasn't pen ink either. It looked almost like wax. I touched it. It flaked a little, leaving a faint red mark on my fingertip. And just then I remembered something. 2 days ago, while cleaning the study, I'd found an old envelope tucked behind one of his books. It was sealed with red wax, the same color, the same texture. I hadn't opened it then. I thought it was one of his business letters. But now, I stood there in the kitchen, the note in my hand, my heart pounding softly. Maybe it was just another ordinary day. Or maybe it was the beginning of something I was never supposed to find. So I went to his study. The smell of his pipe tobacco still lingered there, warm and familiar. The desk looked neat, too neat, like he had cleaned it intentionally. But when I looked closer, I saw the edge of that same old envelope, half hidden under a stack of papers. It had the same red wax seal. Only this time it had a faint thumbprint pressed into the wax. His. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. My hands trembled. The envelope wasn't addressed to anyone, but written on the back in his handwriting were 5 words. "For the best woman alive." At the table with a half-empty plate and 100 unspoken questions. When I finally joined him in the bedroom, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. His breathing was steady, but there was a faint scent in the air. Something flowery, faintly sweet. Not my perfume. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the moonlight falling across his face. The man I'd built my life around, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, suddenly felt like a stranger. The next morning he was gone before I woke up. A note on the table read, "Don't wait for me tonight." I turned the note over in my hand. He never left notes. He always called. That's when I noticed something odd. A small smear of red ink at the bottom of the paper. It wasn't lipstick. It wasn't pen ink either. It looked almost like wax. I touched it. It flaked a little, leaving a faint red mark on my fingertip. And just then I remembered something. 2 days ago, while cleaning the study, I'd found an old envelope tucked behind one of his books. It was sealed with red wax, the same color, the same texture. I hadn't opened it then. I thought it was one of his business letters. But now, I stood there in the kitchen, the note in my hand, my heart pounding softly. Maybe it was just another ordinary day. Or maybe it was the beginning of something I was never supposed to find. So I went to his study. The smell of his pipe tobacco still lingered there, warm and familiar. The desk looked neat, too neat, like he had cleaned it intentionally. But when I looked closer, I saw the edge of that same old envelope, half hidden under a stack of papers. It had the same red wax seal. Only this time it had a faint thumbprint pressed into the wax. His. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. My hands trembled. The envelope wasn't addressed to anyone, but written on the back in his handwriting were 5 words. For the best woman alive. The morning after I found the envelope, the sun rose gently over our little town. The fog lifted from the fields, the same way it always did, slowly, like the world was waking up from a long dream. From my kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Keller walking her dog, her blue scarf fluttering in the breeze. The postman waved as he passed by our gate. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary. But inside me, nothing felt ordinary anymore. That envelope sat on my husband's desk, sealed, waiting. I couldn't bring myself to open it, not yet. I wasn't ready to know what best woman alive meant. So I did what I always did when something bothered me. I cleaned. I dusted the old cabinet my father built, wiped the framed pictures on the wall, and folded the laundry with shaky hands. Each corner of the house whispered memories, our wedding picture by the fireplace, the carved wooden clock we bought from the fair, the worn-out armchair where he used to read the newspaper every evening. Everything told a story of us. But lately, us didn't feel the same. My husband's name is Thomas. Everyone in town knows him. A quiet, hard-working man who fixes old clocks and watches in his workshop down on Mill Street. People call him the man who brings time back to life. I always thought that was beautiful. When we first met, he was shy. He couldn't even look me in the eye for more than a few seconds. He once told me, "I don't talk much, but I'll listen forever." And he did. For years our love was simple. We lived in a small cottage with white curtains and a garden full of daisies. On Sundays we'd walk to the church, holding hands like teenagers. He used to hum old songs while working. I'd sit beside him, knitting or reading, happy just to be near. But somewhere along the years something changed, quietly, like a shadow creeping over sunlight. I think it started after his mother passed away. He didn't cry much, just became quieter. He spent long hours in his workshop, even after closing time. When I'd ask, "Are you all right?" he'd smile faintly and say, "Just thinking." I thought he needed time. Grief does that, it makes people pull away. But months passed and that distance stayed. Then came the dreams. Some nights I'd wake up to find him murmuring in his sleep, whispering a woman's name I didn't recognize. "Clara," he'd say softly, like it was a prayer. At first I thought it was his mother. Her name was Claire. Maybe he mixed it up. But one night he said something different. "Don't go, Clara. Not again." My heart froze. The next morning I wanted to ask him about it. But when I looked at him, the dark circles under his eyes, the faraway look, I couldn't. He wasn't the type to cheat. I knew that. But the mind plays tricks when you're left in silence too long. That afternoon, I walked down to the market. The air smelled of apples and fresh bread. People greeted me warmly as always. but I couldn't focus on their words. Mrs. Turner, our neighbor, said, "Haven't seen Thomas at church lately." I forced a smile. "He's been busy with repairs." She nodded but gave me a knowing look, the kind older women give when they sense something's wrong. When I came home, the house felt emptier than usual. His boots were gone from the porch, his tools missing from the counter. He hadn't said where he went. That night, I sat by the fireplace with the envelope in my hands. The wax seal gleamed softly in the flickering light. I traced my finger over the words again. For the best woman alive. Was it meant for me? Or someone else? My chest tightened. I thought of all the nights I waited for him, of all the dinners gone cold, of how love can fade without ever saying goodbye. I turned the envelope over and held it to my ear, like a foolish child listening for secrets. There was something inside, maybe a folded letter or a photograph. I almost tore it open, but then I stopped, because deep down I was afraid. Afraid that once I opened it I could never go back to not knowing. Instead, I placed it back on his desk, exactly where I found it. Then I sat there staring at his chair. The lamp cast a soft glow across the room, highlighting the small things that made it his. The open notebook filled with clock diagrams, the half-repaired pocket watch beside it, the faint smell of varnish and metal. That's when I noticed another object, a small wooden box tucked under the edge of the desk. I'd never seen it before. It was old, polished smooth with a small engraving on top. CW. Not TW for Thomas Wright, but CW. Clara. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The latch was loose, easy to open. Inside was a single photograph, sepia-toned, faded around the edges. A young woman stood beside an old clock tower, smiling. Her dress was from another era, 1940s maybe, and written on the back of the photo, in the same handwriting as the envelope, were the words, "You'll always be the best of time." That night I couldn't sleep. Thomas came home late, just as the old grandfather clock struck midnight. He looked tired, his hair damp from the mist outside. I didn't mention the photograph. I didn't mention the envelope. He sat down on the edge of the bed, untied his boots and whispered, "You're still awake?" "Yes," I said softly. He hesitated, then leaned down to kiss my forehead, the first time in weeks. His lips were cold, and before I could say anything he murmured, "Good night, my love." It should have comforted me, but his tone wasn't for me. It was distant, almost like he was saying it to someone else. As he drifted to sleep, I stared at him in the dark and thought, "Who are you when I'm not looking?" The next morning I made up my mind. I would find out who Clara was, because whatever secret my husband carried, it wasn't just his anymore. It was now part of me too. Then my eyes stopped at a newer entry. Clara W. Personal request. Return by November 3rd. I felt my breath catch. November 3rd was just 2 days ago. The ink was fresh, darker than the others. There was no address, no contact number. Just those 2 letters. CW, the same as the initials on the wooden box. I turned the page, and a small photograph slipped out. It landed face down on the workbench. My fingers shook as I turned it over. It was that same woman from the old photo, smiling, standing by the clock tower. But this copy was newer, clearer, almost as if it had been restored. And this time on the back, written in neat black ink, were the words, "Don't forget our promise." A chill ran through me. The bell above the door chimed again. I spun around. "Evelyn." Thomas's voice filled the room. He looked startled to see me there. I forced a smile. "I thought I'd bring you lunch." He glanced at the workbench, then back at me. His jaw tightened slightly. "You shouldn't be in here. The dust isn't good for you." I held up the small lunch basket, pretending not to notice the edge in his tone. "I made your favorite chicken stew." He took the basket from me, his eyes softening for a moment. "You're too good to me." "I try," I said quietly. "You've been working late. I just wanted to make sure you're eating." He nodded, then turned away, setting the basket down. There's a lot to finish before winter. People want their clocks fixed before the holidays. I wanted to ask about her. About Clara W. But the words wouldn't come. Instead I said, "Do you remember that night when we first moved here? You promised this house would be our forever home." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Yes, I remember." Then he added, "Forever can mean many things." I left the workshop feeling colder than when I arrived. The wind had picked up, carrying dry leaves across the road. As I walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about his last words. Forever can mean many things. Was it a confession? Or a warning? That evening, after he came home and went straight to bed, I took out the envelope again. I set it under the lamplight and stared at it for a long time. Finally, I broke the wax. Inside was a folded letter and a faded photograph. The letter began simply, "My dearest Clara, time has been both cruel and kind to us. You were the beginning of everything, and though years have passed, I still hear your laughter in every ticking clock I mend." I felt dizzy. I had to sit down. Thomas's handwriting filled the page. Gentle, flowing, personal. The kind of writing you use when you speak to someone you love deeply. He wrote about meeting her near the clock tower by the lake. How she taught him to believe in second chances. How they made a promise. "When time stops, I'll find you again." And then the last line struck me cold. "The clock stops this month. Wait for me by the lake." The lake. The one just beyond our town. The one we used to visit in spring before everything changed. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. It couldn't be real. It had to be from the past. Maybe an old love before me. Maybe he kept it out of guilt. But the letter's paper wasn't old. The ink wasn't faded. It was written recently. And the date at the bottom, October 28th this year. Just 2 weeks ago. The next morning, Thomas said he had to go into town for supplies. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and watched him leave. When the door closed, I went straight to the dresser and pulled out my coat. My heart pounded as I locked the house behind me. Narrow road toward the eye walked the lake. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and damp soil. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. No birds, no wind, just the soft crunch of my shoes on the dirt path. When I reached the lake, the water was still, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. And there, near the old wooden pier, stood Thomas. He was holding a small box in his hands, the same one with the initials CW. I hid behind a tree, unable to move, unable to speak. He opened the box slowly, took something out, and placed it into the water. It floated for a moment, then sank. Then, to my horror, he whispered softly, "I'm here, Clara. Just like I promised." I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, tears blurring my vision. By the time I reached home, I could barely breathe. I locked the door and sank to the floor, my heart pounding in my ears. My husband, the man I shared my life with, was meeting someone by the lake. Someone who wasn't me. And yet, something about the way he spoke didn't sound romantic. It sounded like grief. Who was Clara? Why did he still speak to her as if she could hear him? That night, when he returned, I pretended to be asleep. He sat on the edge of the bed again, just like before. His hands trembled slightly. Then I heard him whisper, almost inaudibly, "She still watches me, you know?" And for the first time I realized maybe this wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was something else. Something I couldn't yet understand. That night I didn't sleep. Every tick of the clock sounded like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. By morning the house felt heavier than ever. As if it knew the secret too. Thomas ate in silence. His hands trembled when he lifted the spoon. I watched the tiny scar on his wrist, one I'd never noticed before. A thin white line. Old but neat. Almost like the cut of a blade. He caught me looking and smiled faintly. "Burn from the workshop," he said. But I wasn't sure I believed him. After he left, I sat by the window for hours thinking about the lake. He'd said, "I'm here, Clara." Was she still alive? Was she watching from the trees? Or was she something else? The thought chilled me. At noon I put on my shawl and walked into town. I told myself I needed groceries, but what I really needed were answers. The library. Our town's library is small, one floor, smelling of dust and old paper. Miss Ruth, the librarian, looked up from her desk when I entered. "Good morning, Evelyn. Haven't seen you in a while," she said kindly. "I'm looking for Old Town records," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Photographs, births, maybe news articles." She raised a brow. "Any year in particular?" "40s, I said after a pause. "Maybe early 50s. She nodded and led me to the back room. Wooden drawers creaked open, and she handed me a stack of brittle newspapers. "If you're tracing family history, these might help." "Something like that," I murmured. Hours passed as I turned page after page, the ink staining my fingers gray. Then I saw it. A small article dated April 12, 1948. Local woman found drowned near Miller Lake. Authorities identified the victim as Clara Whitmore, 26, resident of Maple Lane. She was last seen near the clock tower where she worked as an assistant to craftsman George Holt. Police suspect an accident, though locals report hearing the clock strike 13 times the night. That night I didn't sleep. Every tick of the clock sounded like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. By morning the house felt heavier than ever, as if it knew the secret too. Thomas ate in silence. His hands trembled when he lifted the spoon. I watched the tiny scar on his wrist, one I'd never noticed before. A thin white line, old but neat, almost like the cut of a blade. He caught me looking and smiled faintly. "Burned from the workshop," he said. But I wasn't sure I believed him. After he left, I sat by the window for hours thinking about the lake. He'd said, "I'm here, Clara." Was she still alive? Was she watching from the trees? Or was she something else? The thought chilled me. At noon I put on my shawl and walked into town. I told myself I needed groceries, but what I really needed were answers. The library. Our town's library is small, one floor, smelling of dust and old paper. Miss Ruth, the librarian, looked up from her desk when I entered. "Good morning, Evelyn. Haven't seen you in a while," she said kindly. "I'm looking for Old Town records," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Photographs, births, maybe news articles." She raised a brow. "Any year in particular?" "40s, I said after a pause. "Maybe early 50s. She nodded and led me to the back room. Wooden drawers creaked open, and she handed me a stack of brittle newspapers. "If you're tracing family history, these might help." "Something like that," I murmured. Hours passed as I turned page after page, the ink staining my fingers gray. Then I saw it. A small article dated April 12, 1948. Local woman found drowned near Miller Lake. Authorities identified the victim as Clara Whitmore, 26, resident of Maple Lane. She was last seen near the clock tower where she worked as an assistant to craftsman George Holt. Police suspect an accident, though locals report hearing the clock strike 13 times the night before. My breath caught. Clara W. Clara Whitmore. The same initials on the wooden box. I leaned closer. There was a grainy photograph of her. The same smile, the same gentle eyes as in the picture from his desk. But that couldn't be right. That photo looked too new to be from the 1940s. "Find what you needed?" Miss Ruth asked softly behind me. I nodded slowly, folding the paper. "Yes, more than I expected." As I walked home, the wind pushed at my back like it wanted me to move faster. If Clara Whitmore died 77 years ago, how could my husband know her? The clock tower. That evening I waited until Thomas left again. He said he had a delivery. When his footsteps faded, I went to the only place that made sense, the old clock tower by the lake. The tower had been closed for years, its wooden door chained, its face frozen at midnight. But when I reached it, the chain was broken. Inside, dust danced in the beam of my lantern. The air smelled of oil and old brass. Every step on the spiral stair echoed upward like a heartbeat. Near the top I found his toolbox, freshly used, still smelling of polish. and beside it, resting on a wooden stool, lay another envelope sealed in red wax. This one read, "For when the clock stops again." My hand shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a small key and a folded note. "Clara, the mechanism is nearly ready. When the 12th chime fades, time will stand still for us once more. Wait for me by the water as before. T." My knees went weak. T. That was his initial. I set the note down and stared at the great gears above me. They were moving slowly, groaning, alive. Someone had restored the tower. And then the clock struck once. Then twice. Then a third time. Each chime deeper, slower, echoing through my chest. I stumbled back down the stairs and ran all the way home. Confrontation. Thomas was sitting by the fire when I burst through the door. He looked calm, almost peaceful. "Where were you?" he asked quietly. "At the tower," I said, breathless. "Why are you fixing it? It hasn't worked in years." He didn't answer right away. He just stared into the flames. Finally, he said, "Because I promised someone I would." "Clara Whitmore?" He flinched at the name. His eyes lifted slowly to mine, tired, haunted. "How do you know that name?" "I found the letter, the photographs, the box, the lake." "Thomas, who is she?" He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaling shakily. "She was my first life," he whispered. For a moment I thought he meant first love. But then he said, "I was there, Evelyn. In 1948. I stared at him. "That's not possible." He nodded faintly. "I don't understand it either. But every time the clock stops, I wake somewhere else. Another time, another year. Always here. Always near her." He looked at me, eyes glistening. "I thought it would end when I met you. For 22 years I believed I'd escaped. But the clock started ticking again. I felt the world tilt. You expect me to believe you travel through time?" He smiled sadly. "Not travel. Repeat. Like a clock that can't break free from its gears." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to cry. But above all, I wanted it not to be true, because if it was, then Clara Whitmore wasn't just another woman. She was a ghost from a life that never truly ended. He reached for my hand. "Evelyn, I love you. You are my present. But she is my past, and somehow the two are colliding." I pulled my hand back. "And what happens when they collide?" He looked toward the window, where the church bell chimed in the distance. "Time stops." That night the wind howled. The walls creaked as if the house itself was listening. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint ticking of every clock he'd ever repaired. They all seemed to beat in rhythm. A slow, heavy sound that made the air feel alive. Midnight they stopped. Every single clock in the house froze. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas rose from the bed and whispered, "It's time." Before I could move, he walked out the door. I threw on my coat and followed him into the cold. The path to the lake glowed pale under the moonlight. When I reached the pier, he was standing there again, holding the wooden box. The water shimmered perfectly still. He turned toward me, tears on his cheeks. "She's here," he said softly. "Can't you feel it?" And for the briefest moment I could. The air around us thickened, humming faintly. The reflection of the moon rippled as if someone else were standing beside him. A woman's faint laughter echoed across the water, carried by the wind. Then just as suddenly it was gone. Thomas collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "I can't do it again. I can't keep losing her." I knelt beside him, shaking. "Thomas, please. Come home." He looked at me, eyes wide with sorrow. "You don't understand. When the clock strikes 13, it will take me back, and I won't return this time." The words froze my blood. "Then I'll stop it," I said. The moment Thomas's words left his lips, I felt the world narrow into one sound, the faint, distant hum of the clock tower. I didn't wait. I ran. The wind clawed at my coat, the branches scraping my face as I stumbled down the path toward town. Behind me, I could still hear the lake's slow, impossible whisper, like it was trying to call him back. All I could think was, if the clock stops, I lose him forever. The race to the tower. The streets were empty. Not a single window glowed. Even the stray cats had disappeared. It felt like the town itself was holding its breath. When I reached the tower, the door was already open. The great gears groaned inside, turning faster than before. The air pulsed with heat. Each tick echoed like thunder in my skull. At the center of the room, the pendulum swung wildly, and in its rhythm I could almost hear a voice whispering, "Clara, Clara, Clara, stop!" I screamed, though I didn't know who I was shouting at. I grabbed a wrench from Thomas's toolbox and climbed the stairs, my breath catching in the dusty air. Every step up was heavier, as if gravity itself wanted to pull me back down. The higher I went, the louder the ticking became. It wasn't just sound, it was time itself, pushing, breaking, trembling. When I reached the top, I saw him. Thomas and the 13th chime. Thomas stood near the great bell, his hands trembling over a panel of brass gears. The wooden box lay open beside him, the red wax seal broken. Inside it was that same photograph of Clara Whitmore, but this time her eyes looked different. Alive. "Thomas, don't!" I cried. He turned toward me, his face pale, eyes filled with tears. "It's too late, Evelyn. The cycle's begun." "No!" I shouted. "You said when the clock strikes 13 it will take you back. Then stop it." He shook his head. "It doesn't stop. It chooses." The gears shrieked as the pendulum slowed. 1-3 chimes echoed through the tower. "Thomas, listen to me." I stepped closer. "You said you loved me, that I was your present. Then stay here. Stay with me." He smiled faintly, the same sad smile he'd given me on the day we met, when he fixed my grandmother's locket. "I wish love were enough to stop time," he whispered. "But it never has been." The 4th chime sounded. The truth about Clara. I saw movement behind him, a faint shimmer like heat rising from stone. And then she appeared. Not as a ghostly figure or a shadow, but as a woman of light and memory, young, graceful, with the same soft eyes from the photo. "Clara." Her lips parted in a trembling smile. "You kept your promise," she said, her voice gentle and echoing. Thomas turned toward her, tears running freely now. "I tried to live without you. I really did." I stood frozen, unable to breathe. "She's real," I whispered. Clara looked at me then. "You love him," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You love him like I once did." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was almost kind, sorrowful even. "I don't know what's happening," I stammered. "But if he goes with you, I lose him. Please." She stepped closer, her light flickering. "I never wanted to take him from you. I only wanted to say goodbye." Thomas reached for her hand, but his fingers passed through the glow. The air shimmered where they touched. The clock struck the 5th chime, then the 6th. Each strike seemed to slow the air around us. Dust floated like snow in sunlight. Clara looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Time bound us once. Let it release us now." She turned to me. "Evelyn, he belongs in your world, not mine. You must be the one to end the clock." I stared at her. "How?" "Stop the pendulum," she whispered. "Before the 13th chime." Then slowly she began to fade. The final decision. Thomas turned to me, panic flashing in his eyes. "No, Clara, don't leave me again." "She's already gone, Thomas," I said, stepping forward. "But I'm still here." He shook his head. "If you stop it, you stop me too." My hands trembled. "I can't lose you." He smiled weakly. "You'll lose me either way. But if you stop the clock, I'll be free, and so will you." The 7th chime rang. "Please," he said, "for both of us." I looked at the pendulum. It swung slower now, sparks flying where the gears met. My heart pounded in time with it. A countdown to the end of everything. I picked up the wrench, tears blurring my vision. 8, 9, 10. I climbed onto the platform, gripping the railing with one hand. The air burned against my skin. 11. Evelyn. Thomas shouted. Now. 12. I swung the wrench. The metal snapped against the gear. A scream of steel and light. Sparks exploded around us. The entire tower shook. Then silence. No 13th chime. The silence after. Smoke filled the air. I coughed, waving my hand through the dust. When it cleared, the pendulum hung still. The gears were frozen, one tooth locked against another. And Thomas was lying on the floor, eyes closed, face calm. I fell to my knees beside him. Thomas! I cried. No answer. I pressed my ear to his chest. Nothing but silence. Then faintly a single heartbeat. And then another. He breathed in sharply, his eyes fluttering open. Evelyn. I sobbed, holding his face. You're here. You're really here. He smiled weakly. The clock stopped. Yes, I whispered. It's over. But as I looked up, I saw the photograph of Clara lying beside him. The image had changed, her smile now serene, eyes closed as if finally at peace. Aftermath. They say the tower's clock never worked again. The townspeople thought it was struck by lightning. Some swore they heard 13 chimes that night, but I know better. It never reached 13. Thomas never returned to the lake after that. He sold his workshop and we moved to a cottage further inland, where the nights were quiet and time felt simple again. Sometimes when he sits by the fire, I see him glance at the old wooden box on the shelf. It's empty now, but he still keeps it close, maybe as a reminder or maybe as a promise kept. Once I asked him if he still remembered her. He smiled softly. Of course I do. But I remember her the way you remember a dream that once mattered, and then faded when the morning came. I nodded. And am I your morning? He took my hand and kissed it. You always were.
Understand.
Epilogue. Years have passed since that night. The tower stands quiet, wrapped in ivy and rain. No one goes near it anymore. But sometimes when I walk by the lake at dusk, I hear the faint echo of a woman's laughter, soft, distant, almost like a sigh carried on the wind. And when I look at the water, I don't feel fear anymore. I whisper, "Thank you, Clara," and walk home to the man who chose to stay. Because in the end, time didn't take him. Love did. And it gave him back again. The years passed quietly. Our little countryside home became warmer with the rhythm of ordinary life. Mornings of brewing coffee, afternoons spent tending the garden, evenings by the fireplace with the clocks ticking softly around us. Thomas never spoke of Clara again, not in detail, but sometimes in the gentle pause of our conversation, I could see the shadow of memory flicker in his eyes. I didn't ask. Some things belonged to the past, and I had learned to let them remain there, living with the mystery. I often think about that night at the clock tower, the 13th chime that never came. For years, I wrestled with the mystery of Clara Whitmore. Was she real? A spirit? A memory trapped in time? Or was she just a symbol? A fragment of a man's past he could never fully let go? I never knew. And perhaps that was the lesson. Some mysteries remain unanswered, not because we failed to discover them, but because they teach us something else. The value of love, the fragility of time, and the courage to hold on to what matters in the present. Rediscovering us. Thomas and I grew old together, quietly, peacefully. We celebrated small victories, repairing a clock, planting new flowers, or finishing a puzzle together on the kitchen table. I loved watching him tend to his garden, hands deep in the soil, humming softly to himself. It reminded me of the man who once promised forever, the same man who had loved a woman named Clara in another life, and yet chose me in this one. I realized that love isn't about possession, it's about presence, being here fully in each moment, even when the past whispers or the future worries.
Understand.
Lessons of the heart. The memory of that night never left me completely. I still recall the sound of the lake, the faint echo of laughter, the shimmer of a woman I never met but whose presence shaped the life I had. And I learned to be grateful for the ordinary days, for his smile, for the warmth of the fire in winter, and for the quiet certainty of his hand in mine. We can't control the past. We can't stop time. But we can choose to be present. And sometimes, just sometimes, that is enough. A final reflection. Now when I sit by the window watching the fog lift from the fields, I feel a deep calm. Life is mysterious, yes. Some secrets remain hidden, and some questions never answered. But the moments we have, the love we share, are ours to hold. Thomas and I grew old in our small-town cottage. The clocks ticked around us, each one a reminder that time is fleeting. But love, if nurtured, endures. Sometimes at dusk I hear a faint whisper on the wind, a gentle laugh carried across the lake. I smile because it is no longer frightening. It is a reminder that love exists beyond the confines of time. Past, present, and future intertwined. And as I look at Thomas reading quietly by the fire, I whisper softly, for both of us, "You are my forever, and I am yours." And in that simple truth, the mystery finally feels at peace.